Okay. So again, good evening, everybody, and nice to see you all. Uh, Really a number of people I haven't seen for a while, including Erica's daughter. I'm forgetting her name, but it's nice to see you. We get a big wave. Good. And many others of you. All good to see you in the new year. Um, and I thought I would talk tonight about the Four Noble Truths. I thought, oh, let's start the new year with the most basic Buddhist teaching, which is the Four Truths. And the way that the Buddha discovered the Four Truths, it's a story about his life, which he was a prince. He lived in a small kingdom at the foothills of the Himalayas in Asia. And he had the privilege of a prince, and his father expected him to follow in his father's footsteps and become king. And at some point, he just felt like this wasn't right. It wasn't for him. What he was seeing, what he was feeling, what he wanted was something more than all the riches. And so he left, and he became a renunciate at that time, meaning, and the renunciates at that time mostly were ascetics. So he became a very powerful, meaning he was very devoted to his asceticism. And he lived as an ascetic for a number of years and did all the ascetic practices that teachers were offering. And he was considered very good, and teachers wanted him to teach. And he didn't want to teach, but he wanted freedom. And so he kept seeking it. And then at some point, he almost died because he was, it said, living on 1 grain of rice a day. And he almost died, and he gets a message from the Deva realm, from the heavenly realm. And the message is that he's being too hard on his body. And then he has a thought, and it says this in the Pali Canon. He remembers a time in his father's garden when he was up in a tree overlooking his father's garden, and his thinking stopped, his mind stopped. He got very quiet, very calm, very still, and he got very relaxed, and he got very present with himself. He became more absorbed in the moment, in one moment. And he remembered this, and he thought, oh, could this be the way to freedom? And then he gets a message saying, yes, that is the way. And so he leaves the ascetic practice, and he then vows to discover freedom. And after a while, he goes to, he sits under a tree in India, the Bodhi tree, and he just vows to awaken, to discover freedom. And he sat down, and in that night, he has all these visions, all this understanding. And by the morning's light, he awakens. And what he discovered that first night was the Four Noble Truths, or what's called, even better, the Four Ennobling Truths, which is he discovered something about suffering, about the cause of suffering, about freedom from suffering, and the path that leads to freedom. And he says in the Pali Canon, he says, as long as my vision was not fully clear regarding the Four Ennobling Truths, I did not claim to have realized authentic awakening. And so he gets it, that this was what leads to freedom, this very simple schema of suffering, cause, release, path, right? And it's just, it's not even, it's not magic what he taught. He just recognized a certain kind of unsatisfactoriness. He recognized the unsatisfactory component of life, and he realized there were causes and conditions that cause that unsatisfactoriness, and that when they're absent, there is freedom. And there is also a way to a path to that state of freedom. And so the truths, the four truths are to be known, but they're also to be acted upon. And that's key. That's often not emphasized in Buddhism, in Buddhist teaching. It's not just there are four truths. There is suffering. Dukkha is the word for suffering in the Pali. There is suffering, and this is to be understood. There's an origin to suffering or causes and conditions to suffering, and these are to be released. And there can be the cessation or the ending of suffering, and this is to be realized. And there's a path to that freedom, and this is to be cultivated. And so really the simple way to say it in the Pali, it's about dukkha, samudaya, which is the cause of suffering, nirodha, which is the release of suffering, and magga, which is the path. And the Buddha said, maybe I already said that, if it were not possible, he said this, he said, if it were not possible to free the heart and mind from entanglement in the unhealthy and the unwholesome and the unskillful states, I would not teach you to do so. But because it is possible to free the heart from entanglement in the unhealthy, unwholesome, unskillful, I offer these teachings. And so this is an alchemical teaching. It's an alive teaching. It's a teaching of process. It's recognizing suffering, seeing its cause, realizing its absence, and cultivating a life that allows this alchemy to become an organic process of awakening. It's not a one-time thing. I hope everybody gets that. It's not a one-time thing. You go through the Four Noble Truths once and you're done. Good luck. But what happens is we see it's alive, that there's suffering, and then we start to see why is there suffering. We start to understand it. And then we start to understand the causes and conditions and relax our grasp on them, our cathexis to them, our identification with them. And then we find freedom or relaxation or ease or a sense of simply being. And then we see that, oh, there's a whole path that supports our being free to be ourselves here and now in the present moment. And this isn't a set of rules or laws, but really it's cultivating a life that where this alchemy becomes an organic process of awakening over and over again. It's a kind of interactive living paradigm to see suffering, cause, freedom, and path. Right? And it's an ennobling dialectic that we engage in with our whole life. And so all of life becomes practice. It's not just meditation. Meditation is one part of it. It's really a critical examination into the truth of what's here and investigating that truth and to live it and examine it and discover it over and over again. One of my friends said, spirituality is the phenomenological investigation of truth. Spirituality, dharma, is the phenomenological investigation of truth. And it's right in the lived moment. It's now that we discover it, and then now, and then again now. And it's in many ways, it's not just one thing. The Buddha, as many of you know, was called the great physician, right? And it's said that he diagnosed the dilemma in the first two truths, that there's suffering and there's causes and conditions to suffering. And the prescription is in the second two truths, that the resolution to our suffering, to our illness, is letting go and cultivating that letting go over and over again. Bhikkhu Bodhi, he said it this way. He said, the essence of the Buddha's teaching can be summed up in two principles, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And of course, the Eightfold Path is part of the Four Noble Truths. And Bhikkhu Bodhi goes on, he says, the Four Noble Truths covers the side of doctrine. The primary response it elicits is understanding. The second covers the side of discipline in the broadest sense of that word, and the primary response it calls for is practice. And so when we understand the Four Noble Truths and the whole Eightfold Path, then it becomes really beginning to understand what's true and live it based on the Eightfold Path, on the different components of the path, which are right understanding or view, right intention or resolve, right action, right speech, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right samadhi, right concentration. That's the Eightfold Path. And those become the components that support us to keep awakening moment by moment by moment, day by day, week by week, year by year. It's a living practice. And this is what we have is our lives. This is what we've been given, right? It's a gift to be alive, as many of you know. And so what are we going to do with it? Why not wake up in the middle of it, which the Buddha said was available to all of us? And so I'll say a little bit about each truth, and then I want to hear from you, your thoughts, your questions, concerns about this talk or about practice in general. So the first noble truth is that there's dukkha, there's suffering. And the word dukkha is very, very broad. It means many things. It means unsatisfactoriness, or unreliability, or imperfection, or sorrow, sadness, misery, dis-ease, discomfort, discontentment, pain, hurt, stress. And of course, my question for all of us is, what was your dukkha today? Because the dukkha is not just the worst things. It's not just suffering is the worst of everything, but it's really just the ordinary dukkha. The ordinary, like I had a little techno dukkha, right? Trying to get on with you all. And I didn't like it. And I get nervous. I won't be able to do it. Right. And it's not a big deal, dukkha, but it's a little bit of, it was stressful to have that. And that is dukkha. So that was a little of my dukkha today. And I had some other techno dukkha. I was actually sitting with a teacher of mine for the last 2 days, but I wanted to tape the 49ers game so I could watch it. And I couldn't get the audio to work on the TV. And I was like, I was not happy about that. That was bigger dukkha for me. But and then I sent an email to my techno guide. He said, oh, go check this. And I did it, and I knew what to do, and then I fixed it, and then I could forget about it. And then I was dukkha free for the moment. But think for yourself, what dukkha did you have? Did you have some relational dukkha or some body dukkha today? Or did you have some heart dukkha today? Or some mind dukkha today? Were there things you wanted or didn't want that you couldn't get? Something you wanted you couldn't have, or something that was here that you didn't want and you had some of that dukkha? Or did you have time dukkha? I mean, I had some time dukkha also because I was trying to do this day with my teacher. I was also still working on this talk when I had time. So it was busy. And so it was a very low-key dukkha, but it was not, it was dis-ease. I wasn't at ease. And it's possible to become aware of this and to free ourselves. And the awareness is the beginning of the freedom. The Buddha said, if it were not possible to free the heart and mind from entanglement, I would not teach you to do so. But because it is possible to free from entanglement, I teach this. And Sayadaw U Tejaniya, who, as many of you know, is one of my teachers and a monk from Myanmar. And he said, if there is no understanding, there will immediately be resistance to unpleasant experience. We need to learn to accept things as they are, and that also means accepting difficult experience as it is. And then he's talking about dukkha, because then that's the beginning of understanding. Or more poetically, Oscar Wilde, I believe the English writer, said, where there is sorrow, there is holy ground. Where there is sorrow, there is holy ground. That when we turn towards our heartache, our sorrow, our sadness, our pain, it's the beginning of becoming free of it. And the second noble truth is about the cause or the conditions that lead to dukkha. The word that's in the Pali is tanha, and tanha means thirst or desire or craving, whether it's physical or emotional or mental. And craving usually is some feeling of lack or need, or we want, or we're missing, or we don't want what's here, is also part of that craving. And it's very normal. We have it all the time. Oh, I like this. I don't like that. I want this. I don't want that. And when we can see it, then we can make a choice about whether we're going to follow the want or not. But if we're not aware of it, we react so automatically, so habitually. And the habitualness is part of the dukkha. And it's one of the great things about coming on retreat, which some of you were on the retreat I taught over New Year's. And all you're doing is sitting, walking, eating, pissing, shitting, and sleeping. Like that's the whole retreat, really. And then you meet with teachers a little bit, and you hear Dharma talk, and there's a little bit more. But really, it's all about, oh, can you just be a human being and be aware of being a human being? And all that, and you see how quickly you want this, you don't want that. I want to sit here. I want them to ring the bell now. Ring the goddamn bell, because it feels like 45 minutes feels like a long time sometimes. And it is. But if we're aware of it, we can be aware of the energy of the wanting instead of just being at the mercy of it. So the second noble truth is about the cause or the thirst that leads to suffering. And the third noble truth, Nirodha, is about the cessation of suffering or the letting go of suffering or the relaxing even with what is difficult. There's one of my favorite, really like all-time favorite Buddhist texts is the Shin Ming. And it was from the Mahayana teachings of Buddhism, Shin Ming. And the beginning of the Shin Ming begins, the great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. And it's pointing at freedom. The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. When love and hate are both absent, everything becomes clear and undisguised. Make the smallest distinction, however, and heaven and earth are set infinitely apart. And it's really talking about the grasping or pushing away of any moment of experience. And for those of us who have no preferences, there's freedom. There's freedom from suffering. And even freedom from suffering when what we don't like is happening, we can relax around it. And I often say this is the original translation of the Shin Ming. I forget the man who translated it right now, but when he translated it a second time, he translated it a little more accurately, but not as poetically. So I like the poetic, right? The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. And the second translation was, the great way is not difficult for those who are not attached to their preferences, which is more accurate, but less poetic, because we all have preferences. And so letting go of our attachment to our preferences, relaxing with them is very freeing. The Shin Ming also has another beautiful line pointing at the freedom from suffering. It says, realization or awakening is to be without anxiety about non-perfection. And I'm sure all of you have that now, right? Realization is to be without anxiety about non-perfection. And my friend Stephen Batchelor, who I very much appreciate as a Buddhist practitioner, and somebody who's into secular Buddhism. He wrote, the Buddha acknowledged the existential condition of anguish. That's how he translates dukkha. Buddha acknowledged the existential condition of anguish. On examination, he found its origins to lie in self-centered craving, tanha. On examination, he found its origins to lie in self-centered craving. He realized that this could cease, and he prescribed the cultivation of a path of life, embracing all aspects of human experience as an effective treatment. And this is, of course, the fourth noble truth, which is magga, or the path, which includes, as I said, right understanding, intention, action, speech, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. And really, it's what leads to freedom, or to awakening, or to what's sometimes talked about in Buddhism as the sure heart's release. And it's a beautiful word, to awake, to become awake. It comes from Old English, and it means to spring into being, or to arise into being, or to originate into being. And it means becoming ourselves, to spring into the essence and truth of what we are, and the goodness of what we are, and the holiness, if you will, of what we are. And it's available to us here and now. And there's different levels of awakening that include moment by moment awakening, or very full awakening. Again, Sayadaw U Tejaniya, he said, if you continue to practice daily, all day long, always with the commitment to try and bring awareness to every part of your life, it will happen. You can become enlightened in daily life. And this is from somebody who did, because before he was a monk, he was a householder like all of us, and he had a business and a family. And for many, many years, that's all he did, but he practiced so diligently in his life and in his business day that he became awakened. And his teachers, his monastic teachers, all said, you have to teach. And we all have the good fortune to be here to practice. We have the good fortune of having the Dharma offered to us, and the good fortune to have the the Sangha, the community, so we can practice. And my friend Jack Kornfield said, if we understand community as a place to mature our practice of steadiness, patience, and compassion, to become conscious together with others, then we have the fertile ground, the fertile soil of awakening. And that's what we're doing here tonight, where this is part of tending the soil, the fertile soil of awakening is right here. So those are a few words about the Four Truths from me. I would love to hear from all of you.